Hey everyone, welcome to the Smiling Homeschooler podcast. We're glad you can join us again this week. Before we begin, we want to say thank you to Teaching Textbooks for making this possible. They're an amazing math curriculum. Our family loves using them, and we think you will too. So if you're planning for next year a little bit, don't buy anything else. Go check out teachingtextbooks.com, get a free trial, and view their, what it's like, and then sign up because they're just an amazing company and an amazing supporter of what we do. Today's show is also being underwritten by Samaritan Ministries and Redeem Health Share, where members are committed to honoring Christ through a community of Christians that pay one another's medical bills. Redeem Health Share helps families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading in career or in ministry changes or in bringing mom home. And you can learn more about Redeem Health Share by Samaritan Ministries in the show notes or in the comments of the Facebook chat. So, but we appreciate everyone being here. So, Dad, if you're ready, go ahead and get started. Let's go.
Well, I'm going to start off. I was going to go into some chip chat, but we're going to start off with a prayer request right now. Not made by somebody, but made for someone. I think Ben and Catherine, you both know Suzanne Nunn from Florida. I just got a text from her 15 minutes ago that said her husband, 10 days ago, Mike, Nunn, had a heart attack, and the blockage was significant enough that they had to do open heart surgery. Thursday, they did the surgery, and it went well. He should have come home today, but started having some irregular heart rhythms below. And then she said his heart rhythm went into VTAC, and I don't know what that is, and they had to call code blue, meaning they lost his pulse, but did CPR and shocked him, and they were able to get him back. He was responsive in ICU, but they are keeping him there until they feel he is stable. So I thought maybe we could just take just a minute here to pray for Mike Nunn and Suzanne Nunn. And again, Suzanne is from Florida. She's in charge of the FPA homeschool convention. She has a lot on her plate, does a lot, and Mike's just a great guy. So let's pray for them. Dear God, I just pray for Mike right now. I pray that you would help his heart get into the right rhythm and to stay strong so it does not slip back down. If there are numbers, let the numbers go in the right direction. I pray for Suzanne and her kids, and I pray that they would have a peace that passes all understanding. Give the doctors wisdom. Let them be able to shine for you even in a really dark time. And we pray that you would just be gracious and let them to come home soon and be healed. And we thank you that we can bring it to you. We thank for this great family that surrounds them. Just lift them up now. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, well, so we'll make that a quick transition from that to, man, we had a great weekend this past weekend. That's how things move in the homeschool world. But we had a good weekend. We were at the a little homeschool conference called the Homeschool Northland up in the Northland, up in Duluth, Minnesota. It was cold, snowy, and gray. Everything you want in a vacation weekend.
So which part was the good part of the week? Our weekend?
Meeting with all the homeschoolers. It was super
yes.
fun. And it's just always encouraging to talk to different moms and dads. And I know Kat and Ben have been a part of that. And again, if you haven't signed up for some kind of homeschool conference or convention, they're starting to pass by now. Some of the big ones are already slipping by. We just prayed for Suzanne Nunn. Hers is down in Florida. If you're down in that area, it's a great convention. But there are a lot of other great conventions along the way. I was going to ask Ben and Catherine, though. We had a great, beautiful day today. Did you get it? Catherine looks like she might have had a little sun around her face. I can't tell. But were you outside today?
Yep, we were outside quite a bit. It was so gorgeous. It was amazing. Of course, McKenna across the street was outside, I think, from the dawn till dusk. So
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, unfortunately, it feels like right now all the nice days they end in rain. So by the time I got home, it was raining, and I didn't really get to be outside at all. But other than during lunch. So, but yeah, the kids obviously did, and that definitely makes everything better. I mean, I feel like once you get a little bit of it, it makes it really hard to go back in, and the kids start getting stir crazy and everything. And I know it's a leg breaker, but our trampoline just is like our most used thing. So when the kids can't jump on the trampoline, that's definitely a quality of life decrease for everyone. So thankfully it's been pretty consistent at this point. So,
and when he means leg breaker, I mean, of my 8 kids,
Yes.
I think I only had 2 or 3 of them break a bone.
Just two.
I have 2 leg casts fastened to my wall in here. So that's a reminder. So
I haven't done anything yet. I mean, obviously that could change at any day, but I guess we'll see. But it's just so
I think it helps
fun
when they're all little. We had so many different
to break
ages.
more often.
I know, like the bouncing each other higher than they're supposed to go. I think when they're all around the same like weight, that seems to be better than if they're 15.
Well, we
and
will
2.
test your theory. We will test your theory. Well, you know, the other big news this week is this coming up weekend is Big Trash Weekend in our local town, which is almost second only to Christmas. So we're excited about that. I've already got my stash starting to pile. I can hardly wait. But that's not what we're going to talk about this time. We're going to talk about something that I just wrote about in a book that just came out by me. But something I've been thinking about maybe for a long time, and that's parenting as your children go from little kids to big kids, and not even big kids, they go to adults, where your words become less, but your influence maybe even increases later. And maybe I thought maybe we, just, kind of start like when your kids are little. And I know Ben and Kat's kids are little right now. It's an exhausting time, and you're battling attitudes. And I love it when they're sassy to their parents. And
Dad's egging them on in the background.
I never egg them on ever, but I kind of like it. I like it when like Ben's son Anders will say something shocking, and he knows it's shocking, and he's like looking. He says it just to see what someone is going to say. Or when one of your kids looks at you, and you go, hey, I want you to come over here right now. And they just turn away from you and walk away. Or say something like Ike's daughter, Carolyn, said something like, I want to kill you, and she's like 2 and about as sweet as Maleficent could be.
Carolyn said now she says, I'm not going to kill you.
Well, that's good. Even though those are the ones you really have to watch. The ones who tell you they're not going to kill you are the ones you read about in the news. But when they're that age, they have bedtimes and you put them to bed and you kind of make it through the night and you wake up and you start all over again. But it feels like, you outsize them, you outweigh them. So you can kind of control things. But what we're going to talk about is maybe when you no longer have that control. And Ben and Catherine both, maybe you can talk about that. Because, I was that kid too. Anybody who's listening was a kid one time. And maybe you remember when your parents were, starting to freak out. They were trying to hold you down by, giving you rules and things. But maybe both of you, what can you feel the stress? Can you feel the strain? Or do you remember that time of transitioning from doing everything we had to say?
I remember the stress from when Ben was in that season.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. No, it's definitely legit. I do think that like homeschooling tends to lead to that more naturally than it may otherwise be, or at least it's, your influence is already so present that it may not feel as jarring. I think one thing I feel like a lot of times happens is that parents, I'm not saying homeschoolers necessarily, but parents out there maybe aren't that worried about, certain things. And then as soon as they get older and later into the teens, that's when they start going, oh shoot, now I really have to crack down because and then at that point, it might just be too late, if you haven't been consistent up to that point, at least to some extent. So that's something I think can happen, especially, in circles with, maybe it's like been unbridled access to friends and stuff like that. And then once it gets real serious when they're in their later teens, I think that can be a lot scarier. And then you try to crack down, but then, all that. So, there's definitely growing pains. And especially I remember, I'm a pretty willful, intense, person. So, I do remember a lot of you just have such, you're just physically going through so much. Your emotions are just out of control usually. And it was a tough time, I'm sure, for my parents. So,
it still is. It still
exactly. I think about it even now, like all the time with Renly and Hudson. I'm just like, man, if we don't, aren't on top of this now, I can't even imagine what she's going to be like, or he's going to be like, mostly she, but when they're, 18 or 16
and
or
those
15.
Those are really good questions or to ask ourselves, all the time, because, sometimes it's so much easier when they're little, to deal with things that, that it's a lot harder when they're 15, 16, and 17. But I
feel like you got to keep
Catherine.
I feel like you got to keep the like long-term goal in mind too, because even when they're little, it's easy to just get so focused on the like, let's get through the toddler years, let's get through school, and then all of a sudden they're about ready to leave the nest or whatever. And I think you can kind of miss like what you wanted it to be. Maybe you got so focused on like doing all the things that the relationship suffered a little bit. And I think that relationship is so, so critical in those post high school years, that even if you did everything else right, but you sacrifice some of the relationship in order to keep all your other ducks in a row, it's really going to struggle after the fact. And I think if you have a great relationship, but maybe struggled in some of the other areas, sentence diagramming and all those things, you're going to be okay. Your kids are still going to want to come home and still have that relationship because you prioritize the most important thing.
Yeah, but the relationship is hard. It's easy to say that, but even if you have a great relationship, there's something about, and I like to refer to it in this book that I've written about the handoff. And if you can picture a relay race and you have the two runners, as one is waiting for the guy to pass the baton to him, he comes around and I used to be on a relay team, and we would say go, and the next person would run, and you didn't win or lose the race as the person was running with it in their hand. You won or lost the race usually in the handoff, and that's in family, because we run as parents we get to hold the baton until they, get to certain teenage years, and then you're holding it out and they're grabbing it, and now you're both kind of holding it, and you're giving them more responsibilities, you're giving them more ways to fail. But what I thought we should talk about today or tonight is when you get to that point where you let go, where the parent lets go of the baton, and now the child has it on their own. And I don't know, there's no hard line, because, I've had kids who were 18 years old and they were ready to go. I had others that are 18 and they're still kids. They're not ready to go. In fact, if you started to let go, they would put it back in your hand. But I thought maybe we should talk about, what do you do when your child is going off to college or can be drafted in the military, or, you let go of the baton. And maybe, I'll maybe ask Ben and Catherine again, you're kind of in there. We've done that with you.
Said I hope so. At this point,
we're starting
next door.
We're starting to think about letting go.
Yeah, that's true. We do all live pretty close.
But was there, can you remember, running on your own, or, when the decision is yours, and maybe when you felt it when you walked down the aisle, maybe you felt like when you graduated from high school, when you moved away, of course you moved away when you walked down the aisle. I don't know. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, you definitely feel it. And I feel like the part that always struck me was, when you get to that spot, it's not, and everyone's gone through this at some point, who's listening to this, but you're still yourself, so it's not just like this big giant, at least for me, it wasn't this huge moment that it just struck me, but there'll just be times where you're like, whoa, I've got to deal with this now on my own, and, whether that's bills or whether it's, a trip that you planned or, something you had to pay for or you work towards or your job, maybe it's your first job and, there is no interaction there other than, you show up and your boss is expecting things of you and all that kind of stuff. So obviously when you get kids, that's a huge one. I mean, that felt massive, and now I do feel like the tiredness in the kids kind of just beats out the old kid out of you a little bit, and so you don't have that as strong of a connection to the past in that way. I definitely remember when I got my first job and I was like, I don't know what, I was probably 18 or something like that. It did feel like that was starting to, have some of that handoff happening. I don't know.
I think for most of us, it was like a gentler transition. I think if you go off to college, you go from being home, every day as a high schooler student to leaving for 4 years, potentially coming back for breaks. That transition feels a lot more cut and dry. You go from all the influence to pretty much no influence, at least in their like day-to-day, decisions. And for us, I feel like it was a lot gentler than that. I mean, like I went to cosmetology school, but I was commuting, got a job, commuted to Indy for that job, but I was still coming home for days at a time. So it felt like maybe a little bit more at a time each time in all of those like life changes. So then when I did get married, it felt like kind of just the natural thing, like the next thing in that kind of gradual progression. And I feel like for all of us, it's kind of looked similar to that. And I think you guys have, like, it's been interesting to watch how that's changed for each kid, like watching Cal navigate all this compared to Ben and how you guys have changed just with the experience, and probably relaxed on some things. And I don't know, I think it's just cool watching that because obviously you guys are learning with us.
How about I'm really opening myself up this time now. This could be really disastrous, and I will leave this chat right now if it goes sour. But can you think of times, and you can be painful, that maybe we've crossed that line where the baton has been passed. Maybe you're not married, maybe you're just 19, 20 years old. And you're running, and you can feel us grasping at the baton again. I mean, even I can remember my dad, he still does it. When we're driving, he'll say, "Oh, you better slow down around here, Todd. They'll get you." He's like telling me how to drive. And I'm like, I'm an old guy. If I want to get a ticket, I'm going to get a ticket. Just back off, or I can remember when we were married and, my in-laws, they might say things like, "Well, we were talking, we think you should do this." And, it felt to me like they were trying to take something back that they no longer had, a right to have. Do you feel like there were times, can you think of times where we did that? If you want to just say no, you did it perfect, Dad. You're good with it. I'm good with that.
I remember feeling some of that tension in like the dating
This would be a good time for a commercial break.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was going to say, probably for in general, not necessarily for me.
Because I think when your kids are dating or whatever you want to call it, I think it's probably a natural time for parents to feel more fear. And I remember having lots of conversations that some felt more fearful or, what ifs or have you considered this? But then I think one thing actually you did really well, Dad, was you talked a lot about how like basically we've raised our kids to make a good decision. And so we're going to trust them to make that good decision. And
the jury's still out on Josh, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's right.
That's true.
She still married him.
That's true. But for all my siblings, I quote that back sometimes, I think, to Mom, even with the younger ones, because it's true. Like you guys put in the work, and then I really appreciated when it felt like you were trusting that to us, even though there were fears. I mean, that scares me to death thinking for my kids down the road, but I don't know, trusting them with that because of all the work you've put into it initially and beforehand.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the ones. Again, this wasn't, I don't feel like necessarily towards me, but I think your opinion on someone else's potential spouse is harder to weigh in on that. Obviously, there's the big things, like there's a humongous, massive red flag that the person's just ignoring. I think that's totally valid. But outside of that, I think it can be tough because, I mean, you obviously want to like them, but you have preferences and things that you'd be like, how in the world would this person ever think this person, is worthy, but that's the hard part, where it's not really about like what you like per se, but at the same time, obviously you do want to have like that advice if there is something like, hey, I think this is a major issue, but hopefully in most cases that hasn't been the case. But I was going to say, Dad, from you, I mean, because you're the one who's actually done it, a bunch of times now, do you guys have or any specific conversations pop up or anything where it's been like, this is something that like you wrestle with them, when do we step in, or when should we offer advice, or any rules of thumb you guys have put together over the years that you're kind of
only about every other day.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's all constant, constant, not so much as you get old, after you've been married for a while, but when the baton is freshly handed off, then you're like, should we not let him do this? Is this the person, like you said, and your mom's super wise, and we have lots of conversations where we basically back ourselves off, and we're like, they could go fight in a war right now, or they could, go off if they want and, get their nose pierced, and I guess you can do that even earlier now, but they can do whatever they want, and if it's not illegal, or if it's not something that we would think as a Christian, we would tell another Christian this. And I can remember having other, conversations with kids saying, I'm not talking to you as your dad right now. We are brothers or sisters in Christ, so this is what I would say, and, those have been taken really well. Yeah. But there are a lot of times where, your brother has a nice fancy car. He has a BMW. And, we wanted to say, do you know how much is it going to cost? This is, but I know that we decided that, okay, this is a good time to learn these lessons. Nothing terrible can happen. Worst thing that could happen is he spends a lot of money and then he learns something, and so, so we've backed off. And even with, dating our future spouses, there was always that feeling of like, we're just going to trust God and trust our kids, that, if because wouldn't you say, have you felt that way? Because I have felt that way, where our parents have stepped across the line and all of a sudden a wall goes up or something goes up and you're like, won't tell you that again, or you're just like, it does not do what we think the parents think it might do. Right. We don't go, oh, you don't like this kid? So, hey, I'll just dump him right now. Right. I can remember talking to a father of a person, who's not in this family. And I said, hey, I don't want you to chase your daughter into my son's arms because you're forbidding everything, because those bad things happen, and lo and behold, it didn't turn out. So we're thankful for that. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I think, we talk about relationship, and right now with our marriage group, we're going through, I think it's a Stephen Covey book about like, just mission of the family or whatever. But one of the parts that he talks about, is, and we use this at work a lot, but is, the bank of trust, if you think, you picture it that way, it's a very basic, common thing. That's this very famous illustration. But I do feel like, as your parent, kids, especially as they get bigger, you're you've put so much into, hopefully, especially homeschooling, into that relationship, that bank of trust and familiarity and relationship and respect and all that. But I think you really do need to pick the battles. I think, for you guys, you were strategic and like, we're going to weigh in on the big things. And if you do everything, I do think there's a stronger chance that you could lose your kids' willingness to listen if it's just everything. Because, we see that, you see people.
Because no one likes a know-it-all.
or not just a know-it-all, but just someone who's still trying to control every element of their life at the age of 18 or 24, and it's like, if you do that for everything, you either do gain complete control, but that can have a lot of ramifications, or you lose complete control and any ability to even speak into your child's life because they just have tuned you out at that point. And I know I'm not at that point parenting wise, but I've seen it a lot with people around me, and I've seen the fruit of not doing that and having, knowing that when mom and dad came to me with a thing like, hey, we've seen this, maybe it's like, we've seen you acting this way recently, we'd really like to share this concern or something like that. It means it's a lot bigger deal because I don't feel like they're just nitpicking at every single thing I've ever done.
This last week.
So, yeah, exactly.
No, I was thinking back to your baton illustration. Like, if you picture the runners, when they hand off the baton, that previous runner doesn't just go sit down in the stands and watch. He's cheering him on and probably maybe jogging next to him. Like, he's super involved in the rest of the race. But I think that's its own role too. Like, you can over control and still be fighting for the control of that baton, or you can kind of hands off, I'm done, walk away, and now your kid has this freshly handed off baton and they could really use that encouragement.
Well, I think that's exactly it, Catherine. I mean, really, because I was in those relay races and I would hand it off, and really we didn't say, run faster, make sure you're going around the corner. We always said was go, 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 go. And really, I think that's what our role as parents is, to cheer. I say the little byline, put your whistle down because your coaching days are over, really. And pick up your pom-poms because that's your role right now. Hey, let's do a real quick commercial, Ben.
Well, real quick, we do want to say thank you to Teaching Textbooks. They make this possible. They're an amazing math curriculum. It takes a lot of the stress and a lot of the frustration out of, honestly, a subject that a lot of kids really don't like. So if your kid's just not liking math and you haven't tried Teaching Textbooks, you should. They have family plans. It's interactive, and it works on basically any device that has an internet browser. So go check them out over at teachingtextbooks.com.
And you've heard me say it before, but let me say it again. Redeem Health Share by Samaritan Ministries is a large group of Christians helping Christians pay for their medical burdens. It might seem a little different than you're used to, but it works. My family has used it for 15 years, and we couldn't be happier. That's because with Samaritan, we share more than just healthcare costs. We share our lives, our faith, and encouragement with one another. With Redeem Health Share, you're never alone. Click on the link in the show notes to learn more about Redeem Health Share by Samaritan Ministries. Again, we want to thank them for helping make this 401st episode of the Smiling Homeschooler possible. Well, hey, let me ask you a question. Why do you think it's so hard, and for both of you, why it's so hard for, you think, parents to keep their mouths shut?
Well, I mean, you've been growing. I mean, you've been involved from day one. So I think there's just this, incredible responsibility that you feel towards your child. And there is some, obviously I'm going to use this tense, but ownership in terms of, this is my kid. And I, feel like I have that right to, I do it with my brothers still, I'm like, well, I'm their older brother. I can still talk to him like even though he's 27, like he's 6, and it's like, I forget that because it's just like this, you just have this inherent.
Rips the toy right out of Sam's hand.
Yeah,
now.
Exactly. Give it to me now, but so I think there's definitely a level of that. Yeah.
I think too, you are so invested. Like, you've poured your heart and soul into your kid. And so it makes sense that you care so much about what happens in their future. And I think parents do typically have more wisdom than their kids. And so especially like fresh out of high school, going off to college, think they know everything, and they don't. And you know more than they do. And so I think it's really hard when you love them so much and you really want to keep them from experiencing the hard, maybe even the hard stuff that you experienced when you were their age and you didn't know anything. And so I think we can really fight to help them, tell them to make the good decisions, because I think you genuinely do just want to protect them, or you do want to save them from your past mistakes. But I think that's easier said than received.
But we forget that that's where we've learned some of our most important things. Before we run out of time, though, I want to also say, because in a relay race, the sound that no one likes to hear when you're on the team is the sound of this hollow metal tube going bloom, 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 bloom on the track. because it has been dropped. And usually there's a scramble among hands, and maybe even when you get back to the finish line, because usually the race is lost, somebody blames somebody else. But, you know, in the book, and what I believe is that, the parent, the adult, and even though they may both be adults, I'll say the parent, it's the parent's job to accept responsibility and to make it right. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, kids are stupid. I mean, I think really, I don't mean like literally there, in every way, but I just mean as a teenager and as a young adult, like I did genuinely think I saw everything incredibly clear. And honestly, even now, everyone does. Like, I mean, everyone generally thinks that their perspective's pretty spot on, or else you wouldn't have that perspective, so, or opinion. But I just think that sometimes you don't have the, even self-awareness yet to see that you are wrong. So I think that hopefully the parent, being that more experienced person who's lived a lot more life, and even now, I mean, I do that with my kids all the time. They accidentally whack me with something. I can't, I have to be the one that's bigger and just be like, hey, it's okay. It's no big deal, and I think that still has to carry through, because I mean, the unfortunate reality is I said things that I regret, Dad said things he regrets to his parents. Every kid is going to say things that are not good, but the parent has to, I think, keep loving them no matter what, and show grace, show forgiveness, and keep building the relationship, or else, you see it all the time, broken families who just never talk to each other ever again because there was something that was too mean.
And because a parent won't say, hey, I am sorry for doing this, that has caused you, or whatever, that has hurt you so much, giving you so much pain. I mean, we want to go, well, if you had done this, and I hear parents again say, well, if they would come to me and apologize, then I could be okay, and I don't think, again, the goal is restoration, not to be right. What were you going to say, Catherine?
No, that's basically what I was going to say. I think if your child is maybe too young to see reason, or maybe too hurt, and you are willing to sacrifice the future relationship to be right, how much better to kind of eat your words or be the bigger man, even if you don't feel like it's your fault, to restore the relationship, because that's going to mean so much more to your child if they hear you say, you're right, I'm so sorry, versus, well, or, you did this or whatever. I think if you can just keep your eye on the outcome and what is going to be the, what's going to follow that conversation, I think one's a lot better option than the other.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I would just like to say, maybe as we close this down, again, if you're interested in this, I've written a little book on it, less than 100 pages, called Help I Have Adult Kids. Put your whistle down and pick up your pom-poms. You can get it at our website, smiling-homeschooler.com. It's cheap, and there are other things you could pick up as well. But I would like to just remind you before we sign off here that the prize is worth everything. It's worth the struggle, the arguments, the going back over and over again, because I know that these are not, as your kids get older, these are not one-time things. They might be, but maybe it's an ongoing thing that you can't quite figure out, and your parents don't get it, the kids don't get it, you don't get it, and you're like, can't they just let it go? I'm going to tell you, as a parent, your job is to not just let it go. Were you saying something? Oh, yeah, I'm okay. And you take it to the end. And if your little pep talk to yourself and to them should be, it's my fault. Now, I'm not saying everything you do is you caused that, but you accept it. You accept it. Like the baton, you pick it up, and when you get back to you say, hey, I'm sorry for bobbling it there. And then you go on to become a championship team. So we're out of time, Ben. I'm going to let you finish it out from here.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate everyone being here. You make this all possible. If you haven't before, you should definitely leave a review on whatever podcast app you listen on. It's a great way to help support us. Also, again, thank you to Teaching Textbooks for just supporting what we do and being a company that helps homeschoolers smile. Go support them at teachingtextbooks.com. And also, thank you to Samaritan Ministry and Redeem Health Share, where members are committed to honoring Christ through a community of Christians that pay one another's medical bills. Redeem Health Share helps families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading career or ministry changes or bringing mom home. And you can learn more in the show notes about Redeem Health Share by Samaritan Ministries. Dad?
Hey, and before we leave, again, be praying for Mike Nunn, Suzanne Nunn, and, have a great week. Enjoy the spring weather and make sure you're smiling.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.